Hello, podcast fans. You've made a wise decision today to listen to JJ Meets World featuring our guest, Emily Vieweg, a poet here in the Fargo-Moorhead area. It's very interesting because she's a poet who is constantly working. She's not somebody who's been dead for, say, like 100 years that we're just reading now. She's a current poet. She's someone who's writing poems about the things that you deal with every single day. We get a deep dive into that, and during our intro, Tucker and I talk about what poetry means to us and whether or not JJ just enjoys the simple things in life like a beginning, middle, and an end. All of this and more on today's episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
The Homework Machine by Shel Silverstein. The homework machine, oh, the homework machine. Most perfect contraption that's ever been seen. Just put in your homework, then drop in a dime, snap on the switch, and in 10 seconds' time, your homework comes out quick and clean as can be. Here it is, 9 plus 4, and the answer is 3. 3? Oh, me. I guess it's not as perfect as I thought it would be. The Homework Machine by Shel Silverstein. In 3rd grade, we had to memorize poems, and that was one of the poems. I remember the opening of The Homework Machine, oh, the Homework Machine, and then that was it. That was my introduction to poetry as a kid. It was not something that stuck with me in the same way that Shakespeare has never been something that has stuck with me. And I was recently in a production of Romeo and Juliet, and I actually sat down with someone who knows what the language means and is able to talk you through these lines, and I all of a sudden was like, oh, well, this makes way more sense. I know what I'm saying now. Now I know where to put the right emphasis on the correct syllable, and it made a big difference for me. And so I've recently been going back and looking at poetry and thinking like, oh, I've been missing out on this for years because I thought that you just need to rhyme 2 words together. And, I think of like the way people think of hip hop music and the rhyme schemes that you follow there. It's just a more modern version of poetry if you're going for that particular type of poetry. And they all don't have to rhyme, and they all don't have to be roses are red, violets are blue. There is so much to the setup and structure of poetry that it's no wonder that people dedicate their lives to certain styles and get to know those pieces. And then the things that you realize might be poetry, but you never really, I guess, grasped it as a kid. So we had a piece of needlepoint. Oh, I wish I could remember what it was, but it was part of a oh gosh, now I can't even remember the poet. It was part of a well, there it goes. That's what happens. That's what happens when you're trying to think of it. And again, this is my ignorance when it comes to the world of poetry.
Yeah.
Is sometimes I can recall something immediately like the homework machine, but only the first line and not anything further than that.
In either like high school or Trollwood, did you ever take any kind of creative writing classes?
I did.
Did any of your instructors ever have you do this exercise where you would just go out and you would find what they would call found poetry? And really all it was it could be like on the side of a vending machine. It could be on a street corner. It could be something that you just happen upon. And essentially what it was you were looking at something and saying, okay, I am bestowing this. I'm calling this thing poetry. This is now a poem. And now you read it again as that, with that intention. And maybe you find something beautiful coming out of it. So in a way, something being a poem or being called poetry doesn't always have to be that was its intention, but you're describing it as something. You know, the words that she said to me, that was poetry. And so I think of poetry as something that it's a deeply personal form of art to interact with, because all that matters is what you draw from it yourself. All that matters is what it means to you in the moment. Kind of like seeing a painting in a museum. You just take your time with it whenever you want. It's not going to tell you how to interpret it. That's up to you, and that's why it's there. So
and maybe that's my difficulty with poetry, is the fact that I've always liked a clear beginning, middle, and end. I like a story structure to wrap things up and to know who's the villain and who's not, and this is the plot twist. So when I see a movie that has an ambiguous ending to it, I always think like, I get a little bit frustrated. And that is, there are people out there who say like, well, you just obviously don't understand what they're trying to convey here. And I said, no, it's my personal feeling. It's how I like to consume some media.
I would disagree with those people who would say, you just didn't get it. Well, it's true that you didn't get it, but that doesn't mean that you're wrong. That means that to you, it doesn't have that meaning or whatever was ascribed for it in the first place. And sometimes you can look at a piece of art like a movie and change your mind about it. The first time I saw Blade Runner, I hated it. Second time I saw it, it became my favorite movie. I have no idea why, but for whatever reason, I formed a piece of a relationship with this piece of media that spoke to me. I think also it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that you're used to, a beginning, middle, and end and story structure, because mass media relies on those things so that they can continue to make mass media, make it very quickly. And because it's satisfying, it's very digestible, and we all crave it. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just what we're always exposed to. So oftentimes when we go into, say, like a David Lynch movie that just feels like it has no responsibility to satisfy any of those cravings, it can be jarring and really off-putting as a viewer, because you're like, well, what is this? Why did that happen? That makes no sense. And for me, I've had to do that with, say, David Lynch, have the initial reaction of, I don't like this at all. And then going back to it, I'm going to try to find something in it for me that I really like. And then if I'm able to do that, I'm able to enjoy it even more.
I think part of it is I go to movies for escapism, right? I go there to have the lights turned down, to have a group shared experience with the other strangers in the theater. And when there's no clear ending, you're sort of robbed of that last moment before the lights come up. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. I like tons of movies that don't have a structure. I'm trying to think of like Usual Suspects, right? So
yes.
By the end of the time, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Usual Suspects yet, like, come on, that expired in the 90s.
Yeah.
But when you watch The Usual Suspects, by the time you get to the ending and you realize that the movie is a lie. Mm-hmm. Everything that's been told to you up to this point is essentially a lie. So what did you just watch? Like, what's the real story? Like, what really happened? I dug that. I like that a lot.
Because essentially, you are watching the way the story is unfolding for the detective who is talking to. What is the fake name that he uses when he's faking the disability?
Yeah,
blanking on that.
Yep.
But anyways.
Somebody's screaming at their computer right now.
Sort of going back to what you were talking about earlier, Shel Silverstein. Mm-hmm. Shel Silverstein must be like the poet that all people, at least in America, our age and maybe slightly older, but definitely younger, are exposed to. Because I think I was being read Shel Silverstein in kindergarten. And the sidewalk
where
at the end where the sidewalk ends, and the giving tree. Man, I just want to give a shout out to the legacy of Shel Silverstein, I think is what I'm trying to say. Those are some beautiful works of art, and we are incredibly lucky to get access to those as kids.
Oh, without a doubt. And I can't think of a single children's bedroom shelf that didn't include one of his books. And one thing that I always really liked was where the sidewalk ends, and then whatever the other one was they did had the simple white cover with black imagery on it. And then even the Giving Tree is a very simple color, and that green color that comes from it is amazing. So we're gonna do this real quick. We're gonna look up his Wikipedia page and see if we can find anything interesting about him on here that maybe we did not know before this. So he passed away in 1999 at the age of 68 in Key West, Florida, which is the southernmost point of Florida. Born in Chicago. He's got a great signature. It's amazing. And one thing that I'm curious to know, like, have they adapted any of his work? Silverstein co-wrote the screenplay for Things Change with David Mamet. He also wrote several stories for the TV movie Free to Be, You and Me. Silverstein wrote and narrated an animated short of The Giving Tree, first produced in 1973, a remake based on Silverstein's original screenplay, but without his narration, was released in 2015. Other credits include the shorts De Boom de Goff and Lafcadio, the Lion Who Shot Back.
Now, he did his own illustrations, too, right? So he was doing everything, and they were so simple.
Yep.
But absolutely beautiful. I was also really into Robert Frost as a kid because we had Robert Frost books at home.
Did you? Were you? Did you?
I was.
Yeah? A lot of them?
Like a lot of them. I took to reading really early. It was like the one, smart thing I was good at as a kid in school. I was terrible at math and everything else, but reading I took to right away. And so I was trying to read like everything we had in the house because I was amazed that I understood what these words were starting to mean and what the sentences meant. And we had a few books that were collections of Robert Frost poems. And I found that poems were difficult to read because I was a kid just learning sentence structure immediately. And so I was having trouble. Like I was going, what's the story here? I don't know who the good guy is or who the bad guy is or what's supposed to happen. But there was one Robert Frost poem that when I read it, and I must have been 7 maybe, I thought this is awesome. And I committed it to memory because it's really, really short. And it goes like this. It's about fire and ice. And it goes, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice.
Whoa.
That's Robert Frost right there.
Now, I read The Homework Machine off of my cell phone. Tucker, absolutely no notes in front of him whatsoever.
No, I just stared directly into JJ's beady little eyes while he got pissed because he's like, you got one memorized, do you?
Glazed over right over here. I find that to be very interesting. And so when our guest today, Emily Vieweg, contacted us via our social media, which is, of course, JJ Meets World on Facebook, she said, would you ever want to have a poet as a guest? And that was not something that was on our list.
We just hadn't thought of it.
Yep, and was like, perfect. In fact, she happens to have a studio just a couple doors down from us in the APT building that the Arts Partnership has. And this is really fun for me to be able to have this conversation and to meet somebody who dedicates huge amounts of time to crafting something like poetry, which is so personal, and it's a chance to be so honest. And she enjoys finding things in the mundane. So she talks about poetry that is, revolves around her doing laundry.
Yep.
Things like that. So I think you guys are going to find this pretty interesting. She's also have your phone nearby because she's going to drop some names in there. And you're going to have to Google some of these people like I did, unless you're a major poetry fan, in which case you're going to be like, what a dunce. That guy just, ugh. How can he not know who these people are? Well, I didn't. I also don't know who sports people are. So if you said Darryl Strawberry, I would say like the Shake?
Is he the guy who boxed Babe Ruth?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is it that guy?
No, that was Paul Bunyan. Come on, Tucker. I think you guys are going to dig this episode, so I don't want to take away from that any further. So sit back and relax. This episode of JJ Meets World featuring our guest, Emily Vieweg.
JJ Meets World.
Emily Vieweg is our guest today. Did I say that right? Vieweg?
Yes, Vieweg, that is correct.
I have been having a little bit of anxiety over pronouncing your name, and even when I wrote it down here, what I assume is phonetically, that's what it is when you write it down, what it looks like and to sound like,
I
right?
believe so.
Yes.
It's a very hooked on phonics way of doing it.
Yes.
That's why your phonetic spelling of your name is longer than your actual name.
That's very true. That's very true. I guess, but my real name, which we won't say here, is way long. It's so many syllables.
Jenna Jameson.
That's it. Emily, so this is exciting for us because you're the first poet that we've had onto the show.
And I am so excited to be here. This is really fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I'm really excited.
So you're just down the hall from our studio here at Apt. How long have you been at Apt?
I was lucky enough to get a grant, arts partnership grant last year. So I've been in this space since October, November of last year, so almost a year, and it's been amazing, and I love it here. The spirit of the whole building is fascinating, and all the artists and the inspiration comes through, and it's just fabulous. It's wonderful.
Isn't it neat when you walk into another artist out there and you just kind of riff for a little bit? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? That sounds awesome. That sounds awesome.
Oh, yeah, totally. And what's fascinating is I came into this like, okay, this is going to be my office, away from the children, away from work, and it's going to be my office, and that's where I'm going to be doing my writing. And actually what's happened is I've collaborated with many people, even just on the space, on my office space. So somebody said, hey, you're doing chalkboard on your door. That's awesome. Why don't you do like an inspiration quote for art? And that way, you know, hey, inspiration for this week. And then people outside of my office, so other artists in the area can be inspired by that quote. And I'm like, that's amazing. I never thought of that, which is weird. But yeah. So now I've collaborated with a couple of photographers saying I went through where was it? I met somebody online through something.
Sure, that's vague. That's
yeah,
good.
It's very vague. But I got partnered up with this photographer, and I said I'm really interested in looking at some of your work and maybe writing a poem back in, you know, me writing a poem and then you finding another photograph that matches the poem, something like that, some sort of collaboration. And and now I feel really, really bad because I don't remember her name, but I came across this photograph and I said, I have to have this. I haven't written the poem for it yet, but I have to have this. And it's like the interior of a warehouse, and painted on the warehouse door, it says, hell, it's here. And the entire image just spoke to me, and I still feel really horrible because I don't remember the photographer's name, but she's amazing and she has a lot of work. So I'm like, I need the rights to this photograph. I don't know what I'm going to write yet, but I need the rights to this photograph. So she sold me rights to use the photograph in a broadside print that I eventually will produce. I just don't know what I'm going to write yet, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's in the works. And it's just that connection would not have happened without my studio. The studio would not have happened without Apt. Apt would not have happened without the arts partnership, and we're back in a big circle. So yeah.
So give us some more government funding.
Yeah, that would be fabulous. But
so-
let's not go there at the moment.
Yeah, we already dived into that with Dana's.
Yeah.
Many, many times I've been listening.
Right now,
Good.
Dana's actually shaking her ear is itching from across the.
She's like,
Yes.
what?
Someone's talking about
funding?
funding the arts right now.
So, poetry. It's not something that people normally think like, oh, you're a poet. Because this is not at a time when people are playing whist and having a walk about the room.
Right. When people say, "Oh, what do you do here? Are you an artist?" I say, "I'm a poet." Oh. I mean, really, it's a myriad of bewilderment almost, because they're like, oh, she's a poet. Oh, and it's the snooty poetry, pretentious, which is so not what I write.
I know your shirt says badass poet on it, so.
And I wore this on purpose because I am so very not quiet about how I feel. I'm not subtle. I don't do subtle very well. So I think I was actually, so speaking of not being subtle, so most of my poetry is very accessible. And I think that's the best compliment I ever got was from an artist here in Apt. She said, you know what? I don't usually like poetry, but I really like your stuff because I feel like it makes sense to me. I'm like, oh my God, that's the best compliment ever in life. Like, you like my stuff because you could read it and you understand it. It was fabulous. And I like that about my style of poetry, which is very just, Chelsea Ewan did an article, excuse me, as I'm coughing across the room. And the headline was Beauty of the Mundane, which is really how I feel, because if you find the little things in life and find the beauty in it, you can find the poetry and find the art in like the dandelion that's just starting to flick off and become one with the wind and things like that. That's kind of flowery and pretentious, but that's just what came out at that moment.
But at the same time, people know what that, they can visualize that,
yes,
and they can see where you're coming from with it. You're not talking about, strolling through a garden that nobody's ever, been a part of, or,
Yeah, no, I mean, one of my favorite poems that I've written, and I can't find it because I wrote it so long ago, is called At the Audition. And it was my first official poem that actually won anything. I got third prize in a little, so I spent $15 to submit these 3 poems, and I got $10 back for third prize for one poem, which was fine. It got published. It was in a magazine. I got like extensive feedback on it. It was fabulous and wonderful. But it was basically just, okay, I'm at this audition for the Vagina Monologues in St. Louis, Missouri, and this is how I feel. I'm this almost 30-something, and all of these people are in their 20s, and this is how I feel right now. And that's basically what happened with the poem. And I wish I had it, but I can't find it because it was published a long time ago, and I can't find the article anymore. But
what would you say is like the boundaries of what makes something poetry that would separate poetry from maybe another form of literature?
Well, poetry, what I feel like poetry is it's just the moments. In fiction, you need to explain the scene, you need to explain the characters, they need to talk to each other, they need to have interaction. Not always, but there has to be some sort of conflict. And in poetry, anyway, how I write it is I'm just finding a moment and I'm describing the moment. And it doesn't have to even make sense. I have one piece that I just started, and I'm going to read it.
Please do.
Yes.
Ooh,
So this past year, I went to a writers' conference in Grand Forks. It was the UND Writers' Conference,
which is huge, by the way.
Yes, it is.
People have been coming to this for years.
Yes.
Truman Capote even has spoken at this.
And that's fascinating and very cool. But it was the year before that I said, sometimes a tree is just a tree. And this poet said on full out in the middle of this, a tree in a poem is never just a tree. And I'm like, okay, so never mind. All right. But that line just stuck with me. So the other day I was doing laundry, and I get inspired by doing laundry and driving and, all those places where I don't have a pen and it's not safe to write, when you're driving. They don't like that. So I have my microphone and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get these things out of my head and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this is a new piece that I'm working on, and I just kind of like it because I don't usually do symbolic and I don't usually do metaphor. But this one just kind of spit out, so I'm going to share it with you because I can. This has not been published yet, and I'm really excited because hopefully it'll get published.
Awesome. We're getting a first look at an Emily Vieweg poem.
Okay, so I called this one Branches. So here we go. A tree is never just a tree in a poem. But what if it was? Were? What if branches are not arms with tentacle fingers stretching to reach the moisture deep in the middle of the clouds? What if the tire swing hanging from the most stable overhead root is just an afternoon of joy and not a statement about ye good old days? What if the trunk is just the support system for the reaching crown of leaves? What if the pine needles are not scraps of a childhood littering my adulted living room? What if the stump is not sad or a story or a song. So,
Yeah.
snap, snap, snap. So, and I kind of like this because
I like that a lot.
I think this one's fun because, everybody's like, oh, a tree is never just a tree in a poem. It's like, but what if it was? What if a tree is just a tree? And then you end up saying, well, what if it's not? What if it is a tree? What if it's not these metaphoric things and that ends up being the poem? So it's kind of fun.
Right. It's a real slap in the face to Shel Silverstein and the Giving Tree.
Well, sort of. But what if it's not sad? What if it's really just, anyway. So that's one of my favorite ones, one of my new ones.
I think one of the things I really like about poetry, just in general, I grew up reading a lot of Robert Frost.
Yes.
Because, obviously, probably the most famous American poet, do you think? Modern day, 20th century American poet.
Probably. Probably, yep.
But I guess the way I would think of it, in my own opinion, is if a book is a movie, then a poem is a painting. So you go to a museum and there's this image that regardless of what the painter intended, you are bringing a lot to the viewing of that.
For sure.
So you read a book and the book is telling you this person said this and that person said that. But in a poem, the reader the onus is so much more on the reader to either imbue it with meaning or discover what they think the meaning is. And then the fun of poetry is debating it.
Yeah.
So I would have loved to have been like a poet who was like, oh, you think a tree is always not a tree, huh?
Right.
Well, let's argue about it. And that's the fun thing.
Yeah, and then what's so funny is that what I've found at some of my creative writing classes is, some people are like, but I don't get it. It's like, well, maybe you're not supposed to get it. Maybe it is what it is.
Yeah, it's not a Scantron test.
No.
It's not like, what was the answer to this?
No. Oh, speaking of answers, okay, I have a story later. I don't know if I should tell it now or later, but I
whenever you want.
I go on tangents. That is my
You're
thing.
on the correct podcast to be
on.
on.
Okay. So speaking of stories, okay, I went to Catholic school when I was from kindergarten through 5th grade, and interpretation. This is what I'm talking about. Okay. And I was in 3rd grade or something, and the story that the teacher was telling was about this superhero. And the superhero was in the superhero costume and doing a meet and greet or something. And this family gets the meet and greet. There's like a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old, something like that. There are little ones and some older kids. Well, Superman or Spider-Man or whoever this hero was, on the way home, his car broke down. And so there he is stranded on the side of the road.
Wouldn't be Superman then because he'd just fly home.
Right. So, but whatever.
Probably Spider-Man.
Probably Spider-Man. But whatever. He had a cape, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, so it wasn't Spider-Man. It's probably
I don't
Batman.
know. Whatever.
Sorry, keep going.
Some sort of superhero, male superhero. That's what I remember. So, so the question was, what does the 4-year-old feel like when he sees the superhero stranded on by the side of the road, and now they have to drive him to wherever he's going? And I was 6. I was 6 years old. So me and my 6-year-old brain is trying to decide, okay, is this child excited because, oh my gosh, this is my hero and he's sitting in the back seat with me. This is so amazing. Or is this child saying, oh gosh, he's a superhero, but ew, what a wimp. He can't even find his way home, So here I am, 6 years old, and I'm contemplating the difference between these two. And I said, I think he's excited because this is his hero. This is the hero. He's a big deal. And I got the question wrong. So apparently, the good Catholic nuns decided that no, what really happened was that this child was so devastated by the lack of superhero in the superhero that he was just really devastated and sad and pouted all the way home. I don't know why I came up with that story.
What's
right
the
now.
purpose of that lesson, though, from Mother Superior to be like, your heroes are all weak humans?
I guess. I don't know. I don't know, but I just knew at that point, it was like, well, no matter what I answer, it's going to be wrong now.
I think there's a way, though, that you could give that story to a kid and then derive a lesson from it, like obviously you got to get rid of the whole notion that there's a right answer to that.
I know.
Come on.
I know.
Oh, no, you didn't know this? I'm surprised these kids don't know today that this kid would be deeply disappointed. So I'm glad we have an education.
And depressed and probably need therapy and medication.
Right.
And,
but if you were asking a kid, like a 6-year-old, what does that kid feel?
Yeah.
You're teaching that kid to put themselves in the position of that other kid.
Right.
So each kid who's asked that question is probably going, well, what would I feel?
Right.
What would I think? So there is a lesson that they could have taught there, but instead they have weird, bad on you, nuns. And also, nuns, get better about picking superheroes.
This was also many years ago.
I mean, it could have been the Punisher. That's someone who definitely wouldn't have been able to get back into town without a car.
I feel like if I had been posed with this question, I would have other questions that would need to be answered for me to answer this question.
Absolutely.
For example, what kind of car trouble does a superhero have? Like, is he sitting and looking inside of a smoking engine, or did he forget to get an oil change and so his car seized up? Because that seems like a supervillain type thing, if I'm going to be honest. Are they riding with me? Because if I'm on my way home from school, he's coming to daycare with me. Should he be coming to daycare with me?
What was he on the way to do? Was he going to go save someone?
Yeah.
So now there's urgency to him getting somewhere. Well, now you better let him go.
Right.
Tailspin is on in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to miss that just because there's a bank robbery.
Right. So, see, anyway.
And the nuns, they wouldn't have an answer for this. They'd be like, just answer the question.
See, I was never a really good Catholic because I was
Amen.
born Methodist. So, I guess, or Christian Methodist. I don't even know anymore. I don't know. I started out Methodist and went to Catholic school and became a Christian in high school, then decided I was probably agnostic, and I don't even know what the hell I am anymore. I'm in my 40s. I don't even care.
I'm really sorry. I know there's a ruler sitting in front of you, and does that bring back memories of Catholic school?
No.
No?
Because they did away with the yardstick, even though we had, I don't want to go there. Never mind.
All I can only think right now is, looks like you're up Shit Creek from Blues Brothers when they're meeting with Mother Superior, and then
I love that scene.
The penguin
tosses them down the stairs.
I love that scene. That was so funny. But anyway.
So when did you start to get into poetry?
I've been writing ever since I was a kid. I know some
So
people,
like at Catholic school?
No. Yes. My first, I guess, creative writing item was I was 9 years old, and a lot of people have like a traumatic experience to spawn their creativity. Mine was my first story that I wrote was The Truth About Santa Claus. That was my traumatic event at age 9. Yes. So I wrote this story about this little girl who found out the truth about Santa Claus and ran away. It's probably in a notebook somewhere, but I don't remember. But that was my first experience with creative writing was I'm writing this just to get back at you for ruining my childhood.
So you named names in your story is what you're saying.
Mom, Dad, and my character, well, not me, the main character was named Amy because that was my favorite name. I don't know why. And the sister, in the story, the main character had a brother because I guess I had always wanted a brother instead of a little sister. I don't know.
You were really projecting a lot in this first piece.
Wow.
Yes, I was projecting a lot. It was definitely my communication style back then to do it all through creative writing. But I've honed that now. It's been lots of years since then. So, but yeah, I've been writing forever. So I started with that little ditty back in, age 9. And then I was writing some poetry in high school, and looking back on it now, it was really bad. It was so bad, awful stuff.
Yeah, but you got to get that out of the way in high school, right?
Yes, it was just sing-songy and really not good rhymes and just bad.
Poetry and kissing. You get the bad stuff out of the way in high school. So by the time you get to college, you wish you were back doing the bad stuff again.
Well,
but then when you become an adult...
Think it ever happened in reverse where someone was really good at poetry and kissing when they were young, but when they graduated high school, they just went downhill from there?
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun at all. Yeah, it's like, oh, I was such a good poet back in the day. Yeah, but actually, I went through a period of time when I did not write at all. I was a freshman in college, and I went to a small college in Iowa, and I was taking a writing poetry class. And the instructor basically said, I don't remember the exact words, but basically the instructor said, "This sucks. this is crap. I don't even know why you wrote this. I don't know if those were the exact words, but that's definitely the emotion that I had. Was basically, I don't know why you even bothered to write this because it's not worth anything. There's no even bother editing. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll stop writing then. 10 years I didn't write.
Wow.
Yeah, for 10 years. So I went from age 18 to 28 basically without writing at all. So I was 28 and I had my son by this time. He was 3, 4, and I went back to school. I was working at Washington University in St. Louis as an administrative assistant, and we got to take free classes. So I'm like, you know what? I haven't done writing in a while. I haven't taken a poetry class. I haven't done a workshop. I have all this crap writing from my undergrad. Why not? So I took this poetry class and I was scared to death. I was like, they're gonna destroy me. They're gonna rip me apart. And I know there's only 6 people here, but I'm miserable and I'm horrible and I don't even know why I'm doing this. But Mom said I should, so I will. Because it's free. Just do it. Well, and it was the best situation to be in, because I go into this classroom and there I am with other adults. So I wasn't the old one, because it was an evening class. It was all adults. Everybody was over 25 in the class. It was wonderful, because it was other people. It was my peers. So I go to this class, and the instructor's name is Brian, and we go through a couple classes, and then we go to, okay, it's workshop time. And I'm like, oh, God, here we go. And I give read my poem, and then we pass it around to hear other voices read the poem. And Brian, brilliant, says, you know what? I see where this is going. And he's tapping on the table. I see where this is going here. But there's just something... And I think clunky, that's it. There's just something clunky about this right here. Now, this is good. This is coming up, and I see where this is all going up here. But this is just, something's clunky here. And I'm just like, that is the kind of feedback that I need. I don't, saying this is really crap. Well, thanks, but that doesn't help me. That's like...
That's just bad teaching. I mean, straight up, just saying, wow, this sucks.
Yeah, this is really bad. That's like saying, okay, math, that's wrong. It's like, okay, how do I fix it so I don't blow up the science lab? It's like... So I think but, some people have... So after that, it was like, oh, that's how feedback is supposed to happen. It was... changed my life, and it taught me how I want to approach teaching or tutoring or anything that I do, parenting, everything. It's like, okay, well, we can't fix it unless we know what's wrong and how to fix it, or at least here's an idea of how to fix it. So it totally changed my life. And so I'm the first person to say at like a job interview or something, it's like, I'm very confident in what I do, but if I don't know something, please tell me so I can fix it. And I guess employers like that. It's like, you mean you want me to tell you that you're doing something wrong? It's like, please, yes. So that way I can fix it. I mean, I can't fix it if if I don't know, then I'll keep doing the wrong thing. So, but I pushed this idea of kindness and constructive feedback through all facets of my life. It's been eye-opening for me, and it's helped me really relate to other people and other writers. I met we did the mental health arts thing here at APT, and I was the poet that was here that Dana talked about. So that was me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's talking about me. That was fascinating. That was really cool. I'm like, that's me. Okay, nerd. I'm such a nerd. But
you're in the right place.
Yay. So I was just kind of milling around and trying to socialize. I'm not good at that. I'm socially inept, and which doesn't. I know you're looking at me.
You're not
like,
talking like someone who is socially inept.
I'm talking and talking and talking because I don't know what else to say.
Socially inept person would be like, yeah, yep.
Oh,
yeah,
I do that
poetry.
too. I do that too. But see, when I get passionate about something, then it spews forth like
away.
Spewing. Yes. So I met this this student. She had just graduated from high school. So she comes up to me and says, I'm supposed to say hello to you. I'm like, okay, nice to meet you. I'm Emily. Okay, so I'm supposed to talk to you. It was just lovely. And I'm like, oh, honey, you are fine. I am so not so important that you have to feel nervous to talk to me. I am nowhere near important. So please, I'm just me. And she was just like, okay, well, I write, but I don't know if I'm any good. And, I think I'm doing this right. So she showed me a couple of her poems and I'm like,
it's crap.
No.
No?
No, I didn't say that, JJ.
Oh. Well, she's so young. You got to give her 10-year dry spell
Right.
to really work up the next level.
See,
you're throwing your own story out of the mix.
I don't care. No, but I was just like, look, I'll be honest with you, but I'll be kind about it. I mean, if it's bad, I'll say, you know what, I don't get it, but what are you trying to say? And then we'll have a discussion about it, not just throw it across the room and say, well, this is garbage. I don't even know why you bothered to write it. So, but yeah, it was just really, really sweet. And she was, the way she approached me was, I'm supposed to talk to you. And I'm like, that's how I would approach somebody I don't know. It's like, actually, that's the way I did approach somebody. I'm just going to keep talking.
Yep, keep going.
Okay, so this was March, I went to the American Writers and Writing Programs Conference. It's this big, massive, 20,000 people that go to this thing. And we went, this year it was in Florida. And all the past 6 months before this, I had been tweeting with a couple of very famous poets, Kaveh Akbar, who's brilliant. He's an Iranian-American poet, and he's amazing. And Jericho Brown, who is, I think he has a Guggenheim. I don't remember. I mean, he's going to yell at me when he finds out that I don't remember his qualifications. But so I had been tweeting. It's like, hey, I was supposed to do this conference with you, but I wasn't able to go. So we totally need to meet at AWP. And we're like, yay, Hugfest. Cool. This is great. I decided that meant, yes, we are going to have a Hugfest. This was not just a polite to do. It was really I'm going to meet these people and hug them. Yeah. So there I am in the middle of the conference in the convention center, and I'm just walking to the next presentation that I'm going to, and like a beacon of light, there is Jericho Brown. And I'm like, oh my God, you're Jericho Brown. You're Jericho Brown. I became the world's biggest fangirl nerd. I swear I turned into a puddle of noodles on the floor. I melted. It was ridiculous, and I felt so dumb. I channeled my inner Elvis fan.
Oh, good.
Tears. I'm like, oh my God, I'm supposed to hug you. I actually said that. I'm supposed to hug you. I'm Emily, and I'm supposed to hug you. And he's like, oh, you're so sweet. I'm like, you smell nice. I mean, it was so awful. But he was very gracious and very sweet. And yes, so that was that day. And then the next day, same corridor, same time of day, up comes Kaveh Akbar. And I'm just like, oh, you're Kaveh Akbar. And his fiance, Paige, another amazing poet, was there also. And I said, I'm Emily, and I'm supposed to say hi to you. Remember, we have a hug fest with Jericho Brown. And he's like, Emily, and he comes and he gives me this big hug, and I'm just like, he's touching me. He's touching me. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to meet you. I'm such a big fan. And he says, Emily, it's so good to meet you. I want you to meet Paige. Paige, this is Emily, and she's an amazing poet. And I jaw floor. What? What? You said that? You said that. And I turned to Paige. He just said that. I actually said that to these two people who are just people, yet they are famous people in my little realm of poetry, and I'm such a huge fan of theirs. But yes, I was.
Yeah, but that's the experience that you just had with this young lady who came up to you as well. She's like, you're somebody who's doing exactly what I want to do, who I respect.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of perspective,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
There's always somebody that somebody else looks up to.
Oh, yeah.
And when you realize that they're human beings, and when you can get some form of feedback, by saying she's a great poet, it must have validated every scrap of paper you've ever thrown in the garbage and every piece of ink. And
I wore this shirt and I did not wash it for a week because I'm like, these are my poets. These are my people who have literally touched my shirt. I was a complete idiot, but I mean, later on I was cool about it and I'm like, okay, I'm at Cafe Akbar.
We're contemporaries now.
Yes, we are peers now. As I'm rolling my eyes and snorting a little bit because it's like I'm so nowhere near that level. But I don't think any of us feel like that.
So this conference has 20,000 people at it. There are the greats, the giants of the poetry world. I'm going to be frank and say I've never heard of either of those two people. But and this is why. I stopped reading poetry when I was in high school. For a very similar reason why you stopped writing it.
Yeah.
Because I was told I was wrong in an interpretation of a piece.
Oh my God.
And it was a Robert Frost piece.
Oh yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm wrong. Oh, there's, this teacher, this scholar knows that is so this must not be something that I'm good at.
Right.
Now, in recent years, I've started getting more into it. I remember pulling a book off of my mom's bookshelf that was, like 21st century emerging, poets. And really finding like, oh, this speaks to me in this way. And now that I'm out of school and I don't have to go for some random adult's, opinion.
Yes.
I have found that I do enjoy poetry, and there's a huge world out there, a massive world.
Yes, there really is. And it's just exploding. And it's kind of sad to say it this way, with all of the crap that's happening in our country, the protest poetry, the resistance poetry, the, Save Puerto Rico poetry, everything is spilling out. With technology the way it is, there are webzines, there are electronic magazines online free that you can get to, you can read, you can subscribe to. There are online journals that are, accessible, and it's remarkable. I mean, poetry is everywhere. You can find it if you really look for it. Just Google, I don't know, poets and writers, and you'll come up with all of these websites. And these are established writers. These aren't just, the brand new writers who think they can write. These are people who have book deals. These are people who are teaching the craft. And, Kaveh Akbar teaches poetry writing. He's I think he's either in a PhD program or has his PhD. I don't remember. But he's in the field and he's practicing and he's teaching, all of it at the same time. Jericho Brown, the same thing. All of these folks are in the field and they're practicing in the field and they're teaching the field, which is phenomenal. And I think some people go into like higher education, like the Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, which is what I have that degree. So I went to graduate school for poetry writing. And so technically I could teach English at the college level right now. I don't because unfortunately English professors don't retire. So that means there aren't very many English professor or English instructor positions available for up-and-coming English instructors. And also, I don't have a book deal. So if you want to teach creative writing, you almost always have to have a master's degree, a Master of Fine Arts degree, and a book that's not self-published. So, I could do that if I get a book deal. But I think that I actually, my passion more is for helping people who don't feel like they have a voice to find their voice. Because which I think is very, very important, especially now because of all of the hell that this country is going through. And I'm not going to go political because it's just too late in the day for that. But I mean, voices are not being heard, and they haven't been heard for a while. And now it seems like they're even being forced to be silent. So I find it not a duty, but it's just it's what I need to do. I want to help people find their voice. I have 2 kids, and they're both on the autism spectrum. And so I'm their advocate, and I had to help them find, I have to be their voice until they have a voice. Mm-hmm. So I started with this with my kids, just being mom and, advocating for them and what they need, whether it's special ed or, accommodations or taking breaks during the day, whatever. But then that develops into them finding their own voices to advocate for themselves. And that's so possible with poetry. Because poetry, there's no wrong way to do it. Really, there isn't. I mean, there's good poetry and there's not as good poetry, but that also depends on what you're looking for. There's some form poetry that I just do not like. I do not care for some sonnets. And I know I'm going to be like burned at the stake for this, but I just don't care for them. I love Edgar Allan Poe, but I really don't like some of his poems because they're so, they were written in such a way that is so metric and is just, ta-dun, 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 ta-dun. And I couldn't get past that while reading them. So all I heard was the rhythm and I couldn't understand the poem. So, but that's personal. That's personal style and personal taste.
Like any art, you don't immediately become a master.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So you might look at a piece and say, "Gosh, you've got something in your head. You just have not refined the skill of getting that onto a piece of paper yet."
Right. Well, and it's not just that. I brought one notebook with me. I have about 400 notebooks at home, full, and only about 80 poems are complete in those 400 books. And I'm serious. I literally have 400 little notebooks all around my apartment and in my office. But something else that my instructor Brian said all those years ago was the poem starts here, which is like line 28 of 35. So the poem starts here. All of those 28 lines had to be written in order to get to the start of this poem. You had to write that in order to get to the start of the poem. Because just like in writing fiction, like J.K. Rowling has reams and reams and reams of paper, of notes, of character development that never got into the book. But she had to know those characters inside and out in order to get them, in order for us to know them well enough for it to make sense, right? So sometimes the poem, I wrote an entire essay about this experience I had at a writing workshop, and at the very end, the last 2 lines ended up being a poem. Mm-hmm. So that's a poem, and I have a poem right here. Look at that. Look at that.
Nice. Prepped and ready to roll.
Prepped and ready. So I'm not a religious person. I'm just not. So, but this situation, I was driving to the second day of a writing workshop down in Leonard, Leonard, North Dakota. And I had just dropped my daughter off at her dad's for the day, and I was driving, and it's about an hour drive. So about halfway there, I have this impending doom feeling just come over me, and I'm remembering things that happened in 5th grade, like, peeing my pants at gym class and everyone's laughing at me and I'm an idiot and I'm a jerk and I'm stupid and I don't know what a dick is and I don't, all of these things, and I'm always looking into the little hole that the boys are showing me because, that's stupid 5th grade crap, right? So, but all of that is just eating at me while I'm driving. So I'm just like, I just need to find a ditch of some sort to get the hell out of this situation. Well, something caught my eye, and it was, and this is going to sound very cliche, but I don't care because this is what happened. So out of the corner of my eye, and it had just rained the night before, so there were huge clouds and it was really dark. And then there was a rainbow came, and I'm like, what? Like, okay, whatever that is, thank you. I needed that rainbow. I just needed that today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm doing this like people can see me, but I was like, the rainbow, I know, it's weird. The rainbow was like, I was on the highway and the rainbow, the zenith of the rainbow was right in front of me. I was going to go right under the center of this rainbow. And as I was driving past, that crap, that fifth grade crap just went away. And the angry and the crap and the just, feeling yuck and shame and all of those nasty feelings just kind of fell away. And what came over me was this feeling of laughter. And I was just like, oh, funny. And it's very fascinating the way the brain works. And that's another thing. But so that happened. And I'm just like, I needed that rainbow. Okay, something's going on here. And I don't understand what it is. It's weird, but I get it. Okay, thank you, rainbow. So I was writing this essay explaining that experience, and here comes this last statement. Sometimes God speaks to me when a ladybug lands in front of my hand, or when my cheeks catch my tears and my ears turn red when I see someone I used to love, or a sparrow flicks at my window, or a rainbow appears beyond the highway. Not Joan of Arc, but flames. And I had to write that entire essay to get to the sometimes God speaks to me part. So it's so weird because I'm not a religious person, but the beautiful mundane, the ant carrying its dead brother across my notebook. I mean, there's poetry there, and it really happened.
I think a lot of what you're talking about to me sounds like, in general, the artist's process.
Yes.
If you are someone who is in the business of creating something from nothing, you go through a messy process to get it done, and people who don't go through that,
yes,
who only see the final product, often assume that just poured out of you like that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like a Robert Frost poem. Oh, he probably just sat down, he was on the toilet one day, and he wrote Fire and Ice before he left for the day.
Right.
And more than likely, Fire and Ice could have probably been a few pages long, and then he went, oh, here it is.
Well, I think, with Frost, he would spend months on a stanza of a poem. And I couldn't wrap my head around that when I was younger. I get it now, because you write and write and write and write, and then you let it marinate for a while, and then you put it away for a while because the poem needs to breathe a little bit and it needs to figure out where it wants to go. And then after a couple weeks or so, you go back and you're like, oh, that's an interesting thing. And you find all the tweaks that need to be done. Or you read it out loud and you find out, well, that didn't go over very well. Cross that line off. But
do you find that there's a lot of growth in you start a poem when maybe something is happening in your life that you need to write about, and then you go back to it later once that piece of your life has now been put to bed,
absolutely.
Like maybe you're grieving, maybe you're extremely happy, and you look at it with fresh eyes and you're able to say, gosh, I know what I was going for here, but now that I've finished with it, I can actually get deeper into what's going on.
Absolutely. A very dear friend of mine committed suicide when I was in my grad school program. It was a very dear friend of mine from my undergrad. And I wrote this poem after going to a memorial. And the poem was called Obad After Box of Crayons. Now, nobody knows what that means but me and our little club of people. Box of crayons was our code word for partaking in lots of alcohol on a Wednesday night. But that was our thing. So all of my little group would totally get that. Well, I submitted it to my workshop, and everybody's like, I don't get it. What is this box of crayons thing? Is it really a box of crayons, or is it a tree, or is it not a tree? What is it? And I explained, I'm not changing the title. They said, the poetry instructor was wonderful. She said, you are too close to this poem. You are not ready to have it edited. And she wouldn't let me submit it because she's like, you're too close to it. You have to let it sit for a while. And it was amazing advice, and it was wonderful. And she was absolutely right, because it made absolutely no sense because nobody got it but me. And that's, if I'm putting a poem out there for other people to read, they have to understand what it's about, at least partially. So now it's called Obad After the End, and it actually has some interesting imagery in it, like birds pooping on the windshield while I'm trying to listen to U2 on the radio because that was his favorite band, that sort of thing, and it's not painful anymore. The memory isn't as painful anymore. So absolutely, I do a lot of writing when either the moment hits or I'm or something's happening in my life, or I'm mad at my kids, or I'm mad at my friends, or so. It doesn't always have to be about mad, though. I mean, branches. A tree is never just a tree. That came out of something that happened 2 years ago. And another poem that I wrote came out of feeling like I was falling from the jungle gym. And then that brought me back to 5th grade, which was a horrible time for me. But this poem of fun came out of it. So there's a little bit of the suffering artist in there, but also it's not just that. It's dealing with what you need to deal with, and also putting out a good poem. Not all of my poetry is, oh, I'm so sad, or anything like that. Most of my poetry is really just, hey, I'm doing laundry today, and this is what it sounds like when the washer's overflowing. So, get the mop. I mean, it's really just it starts out as I'm going to tell you what the picture looks like. And then hopefully after a little bit of time, it develops into a Polaroid. So you can actually see the story behind it. So
do you still keep in touch with Brian?
Brian, unfortunately, has passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was very, very sad to hear about that. He was very well respected, and he was just. Every now and then I go back and look at his obituary just to say, "Hey, Brian, I'm doing okay. I'm still here. I'm all right."
Did you ever get a chance to tell him what an impact he made on your life?
No, and that's one of my regrets. I don't have a lot of regrets, and that is one of them, because I didn't realize the impact that he had on me until much later, until he passed away. And then I was like, oh my God, this is the guy that basically helped me write again just by being kind about it. And even if it was a bad poem, he didn't say this is crap and throw it away. He may have said, this is crap, but I know where you're going with it. You just need to tweak it. And even just a little bit of, I think I know where you're going with this. It doesn't work. Having a little bit of affirmation of like, I think this is what you mean, is enough to say, okay, then I'm either way off base, or, just a little bit of kindness is all I really needed, was just, not the, well, you got to pay your dues, and you're going to be a jerk about it. You got to pay your dues, and you're going to have to deal with, rejection, which of course we do. As artists, we're rejected all the time.
Sounds like you got the great makings of a poem right there, Emily.
I think so.
Am I right? I mean, is that where you pull things up?
Yeah.
So I want to switch into something that no artist likes to talk about, but let's talk about the business of poetry.
Oh, God.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
So you don't do this this isn't your full-time job.
No, this is not my full-time job.
Do you wish it was your full-time job?
I would love to work like an office job part-time. Have a part-time office job, because that's what I do. I'm an office professional, so that's what I do. And then have the other half time be to writing and the business of writing. I don't think I would be an effective writer if that's all I ever did. I need to be able to get out and experience things. Get out of the office, get off the couch, get out into places and
that's actually so important, regardless of your art form.
Absolutely,
like
absolutely.
JJ's improv troupe. One of the most important things that those improvisers can do is live a life where they're paying attention to the news,
yes,
and they're going out and meeting people,
yes,
and having life experiences, going to the DMV, getting too drunk the night before a big day, all these things where we fall down in the muck,
yes,
to inform your art.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly too, I say this to actors when we're doing plays at Theater B, that the process is much more about discovery than decision.
Oh, yes.
Discovery trumps decision every time.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, when they don't make creative stuff, they go, well, you just sat down and you decided these are the words in this order you wanted to have, and that's how it came out. It's like, no. I vomited words out onto a page until I discovered what the right order was, and I had to go through a process to do that.
Yes.
And that process of discovery, sometimes you get lucky and it happens for you, depending on what it is you're doing, but oftentimes it is painful and frustrating. And you have to not give up on yourself.
Absolutely. And I have one poem that I'm very proud of. It's called Bipolar Is. And it actually won runner-up to an international competition last year. Ireland, yes. It's the Over the Edge New Writer of the Year award in poetry, and mine was runner-up. So that's second place. And the version that I sent in was not the final version. So I had to, I added like an introduction, and then I added an epilogue is sort of what happened. And I had it up on my door for a while, but then with all of the events coming in, there's quite a bit of, it's a raw poem. I mean, it talks about, self-medicating. It talks about, what bipolar feels like, because I live with bipolar. And so it talks about it in very raw detail and pretty explicit detail. I mean, it's not like gross, but it's rough. It's tough. So editing that to a point where I feel comfortable performing, it's a performance piece. This piece does not belong on the page. This piece belongs in front of an audience, and I'm adamant about that. If it does get into a book, I'm going to have a CD or something with it, because it does need to be spoken. But I'm very, very proud of that poem because it is so real. And it's the pictures that I see if I'm going through a depression and what it feels like, if I'm going through a mania and what it feels like, feeling like there's no point left, and, being in this deep, dark hole and not having a rope to climb out with, and having to say, okay, I need you to take me to the doctor, that kind of thing. But it's very raw, and it is a very painful process. And sometimes if it didn't hurt, you'd think it almost didn't, it wasn't right. Almost, like sometimes when you go to the chiropractor, you have a little bit of a crack and it hurts, but it's a good hurt because it releases that pressure. And that's kind of how I feel about some of my more passionate spoken word poems are really very angry. And with great anger comes great power. But you have to be able to hone it in the right way so it doesn't, you're not just saying, well, F this and rah, rah, rah. You have to be intelligent about the way you're venting. I think you have to be intelligent in your venting. Apparently, I'm one of few that believes you need to be intelligent while you're venting your.
I've always thought when I'm venting, that's when I'm at my most intelligent.
Oh, not me. Usually it's just like it's garbled things that I'm trying to. I think of it like a balloon when I've lost it. Like, it's all coming out as fast as they can right now. And I'll end up somewhere in the room, I'm sure.
Yes.
Along the lines of JJ's question, though, about the business of poetry.
Yes.
I mean, is really the path forward for someone who wants to be a professional poet? Does that really just mean getting published and getting into education, or are there more venues for someone to become a quote unquote professional poet, meaning they're earning their living doing it?
Well, I don't know how Billy Collins does what Billy Collins does. He's a very, very well-known poet. Mary Oliver, Kaveh Akbar is in education. Jericho Brown is in education. Heidi, I forgot her last name, was at UND and is now in Minneapolis. There's publishing firms, there's editing jobs, there's manuscript management. There are so many aspects of publication that I'm not even aware of. I know the writing piece. I don't know a lot of the business piece. You have to know some of the business in order to become published. I mean, if somebody is I don't know how J.K. Rowling does what she does, but she does. At the same time, I don't know what her process was, what her publication process was. I do know that the Harry Potter series was denied like 7 times before somebody took it. And now look what we have here. We have the Harry Potter universe, and now we have Fantastic Beasts, and we have, all of the books.
She went from like writing in a pub.
She went from writing on a train and seeing the scarf to here's this universe that we have now. And which is fascinating and amazing. And she is a brilliant, brilliant mind. I don't know if I'm sure poetry can do the same type of publication success that fiction does. I just think that it hasn't found its legs yet, maybe. Again, I mean, poetry's been around since Sappho, but it comes and it goes, and it you have to find the right home for it, I think.
In my mind, I think of the everyday poetry I interact with is a lot of times it mixes with another medium.
Absolutely.
So earlier in the podcast, you said you bought the rights to a photo because it's going to inspire a poem.
Yes.
Does that mean that you put words on top of it, and then the end goal is that you turn it into a postcard that sells 1 million copies?
That would be amazing. Yes.
I mean, is that kind of the goal, or is really the goal to get that full book of works?
My ultimate goal is to get that full collection published. That's what I want to have, because I would love to teach. And not even like at an MFA program. I'm talking at a community college or a high school, not high school. I'm not certified for high school, but a community college with developmental writing, with intro to creative writing, finding the foundation and helping people who may not have a voice get the foundation so they can further express their voice. So kind of giving them the stepping stone. Because
you kind of want to be like a Brian. You want to be
I
able
totally
to
want to
give
be Brian.
someone
I want to be a Brian. Yes. And he was just such, and yes, I guess I do. I want to be Brian because just having that stability and having that foundation is so important. And it's not just in the humanities and in English and in history and things. People who are welding, people who are in electronics, they have to know how to write too. I'm not just talking about, flowery poetry. I'm talking about a well-formed sentence. I'm talking about a business letter. I'm talking about, instructions for putting for the welders that you're supervising so they know what welding stuff they need to do. I mean, you have instructions that need to be written and written well, with communication that needs to be understood. And having that ability is very, very important. And so I would like to help the people who don't necessarily feel like they have that foundation to find that foundation.
I kind of feel like the written word took a big dive when the telephone became like a household appliance, because you weren't writing letters as much to people, because you would just pick up the phone and you'd call grandma and talk to her like that. But like all good cyclical things, all of a sudden, we're not using our phone. I've maybe amassed 50 minutes of phone time in the last month, but I have amassed thousands upon thousands of words. And I've had to learn how to write so that someone can tell my emotion from it, so that it's not vague.
Yes.
I'm writing at 160 characters, a chance. And so written word is coming back in a big way.
Yes.
And so you're absolutely right. People need to figure out how to let someone know that they are pissed off.
Yes.
Without using just an emoji. My big worry is that emojis are going to replace language, and then all of a sudden we've got this hieroglyphics thing happening, and then we don't need to go that far back in the cycle.
I don't think that will happen. I mean, I think that voices are now, young voices are now coming out, and they're going to say, we need to be intelligent about the way we're expressing ourselves, because if all we do is, drop F-bombs, that's not very creative. And when my son was in junior high, he used to text me and say, Mom, so-and-so's, I'm being bullied again, because he was always bullied because he had autism and was just a little quirky and odd, which now he totally owns his odddom. He's a nerd and he loves it, and he's in school for welding and loves it, and he's,
It's a damn shame it takes so long for people to find that space for themselves.
Yes, and he found his space. He found his tribe in theater. He found his tribe in welding and in Pokemon and in nerd things, and he talks to me about Pokemon and stuff, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, great. And he knows all of them.
Mom, I listen to you talk about
I
poetry all the
know.
time. You're going to listen to Jigglypuff right now.
He would have a really good conversation with past guest Pam Straight.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Who is
Yeah.
big into Pokemon Go
And
Yeah.
theater.
and theater,
Yeah.
and she's a librarian.
Yeah.
Not a welder, but
Yeah,
close enough.
But so he would text me, and it's just like, so and so's bothering me again, and I'm like, all right, hold on, and I'd search on my phone or on my computer, and I'd send him random Shakespearean insults because it would be like, I do wish that we become better enemies. And the kids would be, and he would say these things, and the kids would be like, what? You're so weird, and walk away, so there wasn't a fight because it was intelligent. And he didn't say, well, you're a stupid head or whatever. He was like, I do wish that we become better enemies, turn, flourish, and walk off stage. But it really helped him to say, you don't have to drop the F-bomb to insult someone.
Yeah.
It's actually much more creative. And if it's like, you're stupid, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, gee, that's original, so kind of pushing at the creativity part. It's like, that's the best you can come up with is, wow, you've got glasses, really? I think I know. Just dumb junior high stuff, but he was able to fight back with theater and with poetry, and totally confuse a lot of the bullies that were trying to get under his skin. It was just like, yeah, okay, go Shakespeare yourself.
If someone is listening to this and they say, gosh, I want to get into the world of poetry, maybe as a fan before they start writing.
Yes.
What would you recommend? What's the beginner's level 99 poetry that they could seek out on their own?
Oh gosh. If you go to the Poets and Writers website, which I think it's just pw.org, or Google contemporary poets, just start reading. Find out what you like. I love, and this is weird, but I love Dr. Seuss. And, because it's like, there's a Walk It in my pocket. What the hell is that? He created a creature. What? With words. And he created that. And he was able to get away with it. So that's what I aspire to. I'd love to create my own language. I'd love to create my own characters like that. But just read. Find out what you like. Find out what you don't like. Find out the different types of poems. Do you like a list poem more than a pantoum or a sestina? Or there are so many different forms of poetry, and just find out, just read and start reading, and be daring and just go, because you're not going to be able to write unless you read. If you don't read very well, because I know that I've come across many people who have dyslexia or something like that, and they just don't read very well. There are audio books. There are one of the websites, Poets, I don't remember which one. I feel really bad now. But you just Google Gwendolyn Brooks, and you'll come up with an audio recording of one of her poems, and she reads it. And the way she reads it is amazing. You learn so much about the poem by hearing it. So,
inflection makes a huge difference.
Well, and it's not just inflection, but it's also where you put the commas. And do you pause at the comma? Do you pause at the line break? Where do you put it is inflection, but it's also the enjambment, where you break the line. Okay, so I have in my branches poem, a tree is never just a tree, line break, in a poem, comma. But what if, line break, it was, question mark, parentheses, were, question mark. So I could read that just straight like, a tree is never just a tree in a poem, but what if it was, were? And that's fine. Or you could do it like this. A tree is never just a tree in a poem, but what if it was, were? Totally changes the whole first three lines. Both are fine, but what do I want it to say versus what does somebody else want it to say? That's why I love hearing other people read my work, because I want to know what they feel like it is. I want to know what they read from it, how they read it. And if they're reading it in a way that's wrong to me, then maybe I wrote it wrong. I don't know. But also, once it's out in the world, it's alive and it's not mine anymore. You know, it has my name on it, but I write poetry as if it is a living thing, because the poem sometimes goes where I don't want it to, kind of like fiction and kind of like playwriting, kind of like acting. You know, it's like, okay, this character just stormed off stage. Why did they storm off stage? He's got another line. But the character needed to storm off stage, and that's just the way it had to happen today. So the poem, really, I'm just the vessel. I'm the pen. And then the poem is kind of, it sounds very weird, but I really do feel this way. The poem is alive. I mean, I wrote this poem, Branches. Somebody else could have written a poem titled Branches. It probably wouldn't have been the same. But this is the poem, my poem, Branches. This is where it wanted to go, at least for now. And if it decides that it wants to go somewhere else, then I'll get I'll get a little tick in my brain saying, "Hey, fix that." Oh, okay. And I'll just go do it. And then I'll keep writing, and then it'll edit some more. And that's the fun of it. It's really fun. I don't enjoy the editing process, but I enjoy the creation process. Yeah. And they're both necessary. So, yeah.
Well, we're running out of time here.
Okay.
But I noticed that there's still another piece of paper in front of you that we haven't gotten into yet. Shall we read some more poetry to wind this thing down?
I have a couple. I'm going to read one that which one should I read?
You could read them both if you want.
I'll read them both. I'm going to read Jungle Gym first because that's the most recent one. I actually wrote this a year ago and posted it on Facebook because I was just like, hey, I'm writing this. You know, I'm burping now too.
It's all right. She's working on a Diet Dr. Pepper.
Diet Dr. Pepper and pizza.
Burping.
All right. But this poem I actually wrote last year and put it on Facebook and I had forgotten about it. So Facebook decided to say, hey, remember this happened last year? Memories. Oh, right. Jungle Gym. Okay. So this is a memory that I had and I just started writing it. So here we go. Jungle Gym. I feel like I'm failing. Galloping down a metal slide, thighs burning from the sticking. You remember that feeling. It is 98 degrees in St. Louis in August, and you're just trying to play at recess. When the gorilla dares you to climb the high slide, reserved for sixth graders. You are the chicken, so they'd never believe that at home, in your own backyard, you fly through the air, eyes closed, wind flapping your pigtails across your face. You surprise them all and hoist yourself, without handles, to the apex, and hobble back to class wearing your slide burn with pride. Yay!
See, I only know this from TV and movies, though.
Yes, people actually do the snap thing.
It does actually happen.
It does actually happen at some readings.
I want to wear a beret. I feel like that's how I fit into the poetry world.
That is so pretentious, JJ.
Is it? I thought would be very beatnik. Like, I want a tiny little cup of coffee, and I want a beret, and I want to wear sunglasses inside.
Oh, JJ, that is
Black
so
turtleneck.
passé. It's so wrong.
Is it?
I don't know.
Have some
don't wear-
bongos back at my place in the village.
Some people actually do that, and there's one gentleman who reads at open mic at the Red Raven, first Thursday of the month at Red Raven. And he does. He has a bongos or something, drums, little hand drums. I don't know what they're called, bongos. And he does this. He's an amazing performer. It's amazing, and he just does this, and so it does happen still. So that part isn't pretentious. The beret, maybe I wouldn't do the beret.
I look so good in a beret.
Do you?
I really pull it off. I got a weird shaped head, so
That's
the weird
so
shaped
nice
beret.
for you.
It is.
That's so nice for you.
Don't worry, Emily. I'm gonna send you a bunch of pictures of me wearing berets, and you can judge
yes,
them.
that sounds lovely. So, moving along now from the beret. This piece I won third place at the Women Inspirational Writing Contest last year. And the prompt was, I found this prompt and started writing. If I were to write as someone else. And so I was like, this was a exercise in my graduate study. So I was like, if I were to write as someone else, what do you mean? I'm me. Why the hell would I do that? Well, here we go. If I were to write as someone else, I would choose to be a barbarian woman who shows no fear against the black bear, striking the magnificent nightmare with my spear and gutting the animal to feed my little ones, coming out from hiding in the hut. And I would write about the battle of life and death. No, the battle of life and life. It would be my family versus the Black Knight bear. But no one would win because the Black Knight has cubs to feed too. Yeah.
I like that one a lot. I love
Thank you.
Barbarian Woman.
Yes. And
You had me at Barbarian Woman.
that makes me feel so good. You had me at hello, Barbarian Woman. Roar! I really, every time I read this, I feel like I'm really not trying to be Xena, warrior princess, but that's kind of the picture I get whenever I read this piece.
I feel like if I knew someone who was a Barbarian Woman, I'd call her Barb.
Barb?
Barb.
I feel like every mother out there identifies
Yes.
with that.
Oh, yeah.
That even though they are not a barbarian, their
Yes.
spear is a shopping cart nowadays, and they will protect their young from
Yes.
any nightmare.
Yes, it's pretty cool. And I actually, I refer to myself when I'm defending my children against, evils, that I am the mama bear. It's like, you can try to hurt my children. You'll get a claw to the face and you won't be able to breathe the next day, but you can try. And I'm the mama bear. I'm protective and, at the same time letting the cubs kind of walk away a little bit, and then, when they get their hands stuck in a that's going really dark. Never mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, oh my God, where are we going with this one?
That's going way too dark. Happy time, fun. But yeah, so yeah. But I was in theater at NDSU. One more story. I was in theater at NDSU. And Lori Horvick, bless Lori Horvick.
Lori Horvick, the silverback is what I call her, but
cast
continue.
me. I had never done theater before. I had done like little like the 10-minute plays
Okay.
and directing scenes and stuff like that. Here I was, and I'm like, I'm working at NDSU, and so I'm like, oh, I'm going back for theater. I may as well audition because you have to if you're a major. So I auditioned, and I get a call back. I'm like, whoa, I get a call back. That's amazing. That's cool. My first ever main stage, and I get a call back. That's fascinating. And then we go through the callbacks, and then the cast list is posted, and I get the lead.
Nice.
And
What play was this?
Nickel and dimed.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay.
Yeah.
I've known Lori forever, but I haven't seen that
I was
show.
Barb. I was Barb.
Barb.
And Blaine Edwards was a myriad of characters. And yeah, I was the only actor who only had to play one character. But so everybody else had a lot harder things to do.
Gotcha.
But so I played Barb, and that was my first experience on stage, like in front of a paying audience, which was
Nice.
fascinating and scary as all get out. I never did get one scene right. One scene just didn't make sense, but I don't know where I was going with that story. But yeah, I was Barb. It was Barb.
Gotcha.
That's what
Barb.
it was. Barb.
Barb the Barbarian.
Yep.
Watch out. I'm going to protect my brood.
Yes.
Emily Vieweg, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like I want to go out and seek out some poetry.
Yay!
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, stop by my studio. I have books. I have broadside prints, which is basically like a little mini poster with poems and pictures, and I have postcards with poetry and photography and stuff. I have lots of stuff in
Are
my
you
studio.
on social medias?
I am everywhere on social medias. On Facebook, I'm Emily Vieweg Writer, EMILY, V like Victor, IEWEG, WRITER. And on the Twitter, I'm at Emily J. Vieweg, and I have a website, emilyvieweg.com. Basically, if you look up Vieweg, you'll find me. Vieweg Fargo, you'll find me.
I love it. Well, thank you very much for being our guest today, and I hope that this experience makes it into a poem. You don't have to finish it, but just a line or two at some point.
I think I have the title. I think I already do.
See, so Tucker figures out the title for each episode, so I'm very interested in seeing what he picks as a title for this.
I would love to know.
Sometimes it jumps out at me while we're recording. Nothing specific has jumped out, although, what was it? Barbarian Woman.
Barbarian Woman.
I love that. So that's a strong contender, but I don't know. And
Badass poet, Barbarian
when
Woman.
you were talking earlier about the title, what was it? It had box of crayons in it.
Yes.
So I disagree with the people who disliked your title.
Oh.
That's the kind of title that would make me go.
Draws you in.
I want to read about that because I don't know what that means, but it clearly means something.
Yes, and I think I can definitely write a poem about the box of crayons if I can remember the events of those days. But I think with that particular poem, the title had nothing to do with the poem, just that it was an obad, and it was about my dear friend Michael. So I had the box of crayons in there, but it really didn't fit, and so they were right. I will have a box of crayons poem at some point, sometime. Again, if I can remember the glory days of being 18 and in Iowa in the middle of nowhere.
And if you guys out there have some of Emily's earlier published works, she would love to get a hold of some of them.
Yes.
Because you never know. We might as well put that out there. If you've
Sure.
got it,
Yes.
look her up.
That sounds fabulous. Please give them to me so I can either read them and say, yay, I wrote this, or burn them.
There you go. And that's where we wrap it up, folks.
Okay.
JJ Meets World.
Well, that does it for today's episode. You can't see it, folks, but I've got my hat in my hand. Imagine that I've placed it in front of you, and I have an assortment of instruments, and the instrument I play the best is the podcast. Throw a couple dollars into my digital hat for the podcast you're enjoying here today. Like in Mary Poppins, when they give Bert some bucks. Did they give Bert money in Mary Poppins? I don't remember. I'm not going to draw with chalk. I know that much. Patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld is a great way you can help us keep the lights on around this place. You can head over there, donate monthly, so you can set up a reoccurring donation, maybe $1, $2, $5, whatever you can spare. Maybe you want to get rid of a cup of coffee, or you've decided not to send your son or daughter to college. You can also do a single donation and just go on there and drop us, $5, $10, $20, $50, $100, whatever feels right at the time. And if it's 3:30 in the morning, just add an extra 0 to it. You deserve it. You deserve treating us to something special tonight. And if you feel like doing us an extra solid favor, go and subscribe to JJ Meets World on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you consume the podcasts you love, and give us a 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10, whatever their rating system is. That would be bueno. If you want to catch up with my producer, Mr. Tucker Lucas, and all the great things that he's doing, check out his website, moonbasemaria.com. You might even see a movie of me dressed as a giant baby on there. If you want to check out your host with the most, get in contact with me, well, you're going to go over to linebenders.com. You can also book my improv troupe for one of your holiday gatherings. And I was thinking earlier today about how I only played Boggle once, but I don't think that we're playing by the exact rules. I think we're just kind of making it up as we go along, because last time I checked, there's no syringes in Boggle.